13. Nature is our only reliable and authentic teacher. If we go back far enough, we find that everything we study, learn, and know, and all the facts from which we build our theories and even our dogmas, come from nature's own book. Though many of the lessons and much of the knowledge passes through and is modified or interpreted or adapted by the mind of man. That is why science is at once the most fascinating and the most basic subject we have to ponder, since science teaches us the laws and practices of the natural world, whether of man or animal, or flower or tree, of air or water, of earth or star, of physical property, or of mental process. Except for my very early years, my schools have been only the University of Nature. I matriculated in the College of Horticulture, Department of Market Gardening. But I finished that course in a short time and entered the laboratory where nature teaches plant breeding. I can't say that I've graduated from that branch of the institution even yet. There is so much to learn. But in the years that I have been a student, I have spread out considerably and taken something of pretty nearly every course my alma mater offers except football and public speaking. And here is the great difference between my favorite university and the schools men build. The ambitious and interested student can enroll for life and take every course offered, and each fact he adds to his store, and each semester of work he does fits him precisely and definitely for the next subject ahead, without any loss of motion, and without learning a line that is superfluous to him, or purely ornamental, or simply academic. I have spoken before of the close parallel I find, as all naturalists and nature lovers must find, between every branch and form and expression of life. By studying fishes or rabbits or lions or buttercups, you cannot avoid learning about man. If you know something of cell life or crystals, you can easily grasp the elemental facts as regards stars and worlds. A diligent pursuit of the subject of what we are lays the foundation for a study of why and how. You cannot delve into the laws of ethnology without grounding yourself in the fundamentals of sociology, and history becomes to you simple, eloquent, and intelligible when you have mastered the principles of biology. They are interested. They are interrelated. They are like a spider's web, woven of the same materials, laid in a pattern almost geometrical in its perfection, and every strand at once supporting or bracing every other, and being supported and braced by others. Let me be clearly understood, if I am not thus far, as regards this great force or influence I write of so often in these chapters as nature. I have used the capital initial for emphasis, and because I have tried to be interesting and give my story at least one principal character or heroine, but in doing this, I may have been guilty of leading some of my readers astray, in my gratitude to nature, as to my concept of her powers and principles, in my own belief as to her dominance of our world as we know it and are a part of it. In the first place, it is only figuratively that I speak of nature as a personality or an entity. Nature is not personal, any more than her manifestations in law and operation are personal. She is compounded of all those processes which move through the universe to effect the results we know as life, and of all the ordinances which govern that universe and make that life continuous. She is no more the Hebrew's Jehovah than she is the physicist's force. She is as much providence as she is electricity. She is not the great pattern any more than she is blind chance. These are but names we give her according to the concept of her we are trying to express. It is impossible for the mind of man to grasp much except what he can realize through his five senses. Therefore, we have long since contracted the habit of apostrophizing forces and powers and elements we cannot define or analyze. Therefore, the impelling influence behind life as we know it, we speak of as nature. Natural laws and operations and processes are in fact entirely impersonal. To our little minds, some of the things nature does are cruel, ruthless, wasteful, or even wrong, just as, to our imperfect visions, she appears sometimes beneficent, kindly, sympathetic, and helpful. Yet in both we are mistaken, for nature takes just as much cognizance of the deadly snake as of the greatest statesman. She gives no more thought to the baby in your arms than she does to the menacing typhoid bacilli on the foot of that fly that is crawling towards that baby's lips. She is jealous of the dainty flower in your garden just as much as, and no more than, she is jealous of the scorpion that hides at its base, or the murderous renegade who waits for his prey in the shadow of the garden wall. To her, the flea, the cockroach, the hyena, the buzzard, the leopard, the cobra are as important as the dog who loves and guards you, the horse who understands and works with you, the young girl in her lover's embrace, the child at its mother's knee in prayer, or the mature man on whom depend the happiness and well-being of a gracious wife and a family of lovely children. Our egotism has always tried to squirm out from under this self-evident truth, and we have, from the beginning of conscious thought and the first glimmerings of reason in the human mind, tried to sugarcoat the fact with superstitious legends, stories, tales, and religious parables and teachings. We don't like to admit that we, a little lower than the angels, are no more important to nature than the mosquito that stings us, or the lightning flash that destroys us, and our poets and theologians have invented pleasing fables that give us a sense of superiority and help us to believe that we are the favorites of the universe and immune to the operation of some of the laws. But down in our hearts, we know that this isn't the fact. If we reason about it a little, we will see that the only advantage we have is the advantage of being better equipped through gradual growth and development in past ages to meet life and to conquer our natural enemies in life. To my way of thinking, we cannot too soon rid ourselves of superstitions in this respect. I have learned from nature that dependence on unnatural beliefs weakens us in the struggle and shortens our breath for the race, and that it is only by learning about nature and her laws and by applying our knowledge to the end that we are better equipped to obey and take advantage of those laws, that we can actually make ourselves masters of life and winners in the great battle. In that last sentence lies the key to the whole secret. Everything nature has taught me in my 70 years of work in her university emphasizes the fact that natural laws are incredibly exact, marvelously correlated, and infallibly just, that they afford a working basis for usefulness, happiness, prosperity, and health, and that if we lack any one of those four great boons, it is because we have violated some law or neglected to perform some duty nature has laid upon us. Consider for a moment what life would be if the laws were made, and it sometimes seems many man-made laws are, for the peculiar benefit and protection of some type or class or particular person. Suppose the lion multiplied as codfish do, by the million. Suppose that cholera germs could be killed by no antiseptic or chemical provided in the whole pharmacopoeia of nature. Suppose that tyrants and war makers were never gluttons, never consumptive, never subject to brain fever and physical breakdown. Suppose that there was one law for the wolf and another for the dog that keeps him away, one rule for the bullet of a thief and another for the bullet of the sheriff, or one ordinance governing the master and another the servant. What sort of a world would this be for us all? The impartial and implacable character of all nature is what recommends her most strongly to me. Once I know what she has to say, I can order my life accordingly, take up and pursue my work, face and conquer my difficulties, attack and solve my problems, always confident that the umpire of the game is not going to change the rules on me in the middle of an inning, but will call my opponent out with certain, sure, unfailing, and instant decision. And, on the other hand, will never give me 4 strikes by mistake or overlook the fact that I failed to touch first base. It is the very impersonality of nature that impels in me the reverence I have for her, and the eagerness I show to know all her laws, that I can master and apply them with all the diligence and intelligence I possess. It is this law behind life that I speak of as nature. It expresses itself in 1,000 ways. It speaks all languages. It dominates all growth. And it underlies all the facts and operations of inanimate as well as animate things. In an early chapter, I referred to the dispute among scientists and scholars as to whether nature's regulations and processes work for improvement or not. So much depends on the point of view that we will, perhaps, never answer that question to the satisfaction of all. There can be no question that, in certain directions, improvement is noticeable. One side declares it cannot be proved that this improvement is more than relative, and points out that it is neither universal nor absolute, while the other asserts that the world is a better place in which to live than it ever was before, and that those human beings, animals, and plants that have adapted themselves to their environment and have survived are better types all around than their ancient ancestors. As I have said more than once, I am an optimist. To me, the improvement in all life seems to be evident, and I cannot help but feel that natural law works toward improvement, if not toward perfection. But here we go a little outside the realm of science and step into the realm of metaphysics or philosophy, or something where, in the last few weeks, I've been told emphatically by some of my brethren of the cloth that I do not belong. So, although I am on their side in this particular dispute, I think I will keep a closed mouth and look wise, as the boys say. Now, having made myself clear as to my belief about nature and my use of the capital letter in these chapters when I refer to her or her laws or operations, I want to go on again and write something more about the University of Nature where I have studied so long. I think of myself as a scientist, if that describes one who has made himself thoroughly conversant with one of the innumerable phases or branches of the fundamental principles of life. But I should much rather be thought of, as I always think of myself, as a naturalist. A true naturalist must be scientific, but it does not at all follow that a scientist is either a lover or a student of nature. All those sciences that deal with organs, functions, classifications, measurements, indexes, names, details, formulas, analysis, and minutiae may be carried on in a world of dead things. The naturalist deals with the living and largely deals with it in terms of life. He is a humanist. He wants to find out what relation there is between his branch of nature and his fellowmen. His primary interest is in the application of the laws he reads. His object is to interpret nature to man. Emerson was a naturalist. Thoreau and Agassiz and Dana were naturalists. Hudson and Fabre and Beebe are naturalists. There's a long list of them, and they have helped to breathe the breath of life and interest and meaning into the dry bodies of the sciences. They, like Lamarck and Darwin, went to the fountainhead of all knowledge for their conceptions of life. And that is what I have always wanted to do, and that is what I have done through my 70-year course in nature's great school. As a very young man, I saw the fundamental laws behind all life and development, the laws I have discussed in previous chapters. I had in me a mixed heredity of inclinations and abilities that made me versatile. I could draw a little, paint a little, sing a little, invent a little, turn my hand to almost any of the mechanical or manual arts, and do a day's work. I was not ashamed at carpenting, lathing, shingling, brickmaking, teaming, operating machinery of almost any kind, or could do steam fitting and plumbing, glazing, and house painting, or running a forge or a lathe with some facility. Any one of these inborn capacities might well have been developed into something to give me a life work. It was not until I had been some time in Nature's University that I discovered I could go pretty nearly as far as I liked with all of them, because I had added theoretical knowledge to practical bent. Let me illustrate what I mean. I had studied medicine for a part of 2 years in my early 20s, but had given up the idea of following the profession when I found that I couldn't escape being a plant breeder. After a few years, I discovered that I was bringing my sketchy knowledge of medicine to the test of nature's laws, and learning more about the profession in a few months at my own work than I had been able to learn in 2 years poring over books or listening to lectures. Nature taught me the elements of life and growth and health, the fundamentals governing everything pertaining to the body of the plant or the animal or the human being. She did not teach me everything, understand. She taught me the fundamentals behind everything. Presently, I was my own doctor, and doctor to my men and to half the neighborhood. I saw in the plant that proper food and air and the right amount of moisture were vital necessities, but also that elimination was equally important to remove waste and used up materials. I applied the law to human beings and made myself conversant with that essential of health. I found that I could cure sick plants if they were worth curing, and the laws that applied in their cases were analogous to those that apply to humans. Clogged passages, clogged pores, bruised roots or leaves, disordered circulatory systems in plants were all disastrous. The same was true of people or dogs or horses or houseflies. So I began to watch my own pores and lungs and nasal passages and keep them open, and I invented a mixture that clogged the passages of the fly until he became a scarce commodity around my ranch. This conviction that the basic laws were the same for both plants and animals, generally speaking, led me, of course, to a renewed curiosity about disease, health, obesity, lung troubles, exercise and diet, sleep and work, stomach troubles and diet, all the ramifications of the science of being well and fit. And I began to read books and magazine articles and pamphlets on the subject. As a layman, a clergyman, or a book agent, or a hod carrier, I might have read libraries and made little progress. Now, an active and interested student in the University of Nature, I found myself able to grasp subjects and assimilate information at one reading of the books. I met knotty points, of course, and encountered problems that were too much for me. But in the main, I was able to stand on the solid ground a naturalist must occupy, and to understand and digest just about everything that came under my eye. In short, I had found in nature the fundamentals, thoroughly mastered them, made them a part of myself, and then, turning to medicine and its discoveries, was enabled to dovetail the joints, bridge the gaps, and construct for myself a pretty substantial structure of knowledge about the science of health and disease. If I seem to be overimpressed with my own ability, I am misstating the facts. I want merely to say that the diligent student of nature has a tremendous start over the man who is satisfied with, or can only get, a general education from books or lectures. With nature's laws as a foundation, an intelligent man or woman can master subjects otherwise only to be learned by starting at the bottom and going right through to the end of the subject, consuming years of time. Because in that case, you are learning nature's universal code only in part, and then only as it is twisted or interpreted or partitioned up to provide a groundwork for the particular branch of learning you are pursuing. It is as though a sailor were only taught to reef the mainsail. Later, he might be taken off that task and sent overside to paint the hull, and presently he would learn something about that. But suppose he were taught thorough seamanship from the beginning, including every branch and department of navigation, and not only that, but the fundamentals underlying the whole art and business of sailing a ship. With those fundamentals impressed on him, he would learn handily to tie a knot, or reef a sail, or make one, or stow one, or to paint or keep watch, or read the compass, or steer the vessel, because he would know why these things were done, and what was accomplished by doing them, and what would happen if or when they weren't done. And presently, you would have an able seaman on his way up to being a mate, where the other sailor would be reefing mainsails and painting hulls till he died of old age in his hammock in the forecastle. My study of botany was thorough and covered a number of years, but it was not until I came to plant breeding in the University of Nature that I began to go back of botany into what we call paleontology, the science of reading the story of the earth as written in fossils and remains and prints and indications that are found in the various rock formations of the ball on which we live. All too few people know how much of our knowledge of the past has been already gleaned from the rocks. There could be no more interesting theme, even for the layman, because deductions from what fossil remains show give us an amazingly exact basis from which to reconstruct the history of life on this planet long before man's appearance on it, what someone has beautifully called the manuscript of God. Paleobotany is the study of ancient botanical forms, habits, and dispersions. The prehistoric parents of your garden flowers have some of them been found, and the slow upward progress of plant life from simpler to more complex grades has already been partly traced. If I were going to know about plants, it was early evident to me that I had to know about their origins, and this led me to study paleobotany, and paleobotany, being a short written in the rocks, led me to study the rocks themselves, and this brought me to a study of geology. Here, very soon, I found myself on familiar ground, because the fundamental laws of nature were the same for crystals and conglomerates, for granites and marbles, for sandstone and shale. As for my plants, the book of the rocks was opened for me and plain for me to read, and again I was introduced to a fascinating and absorbing subject and was able to add it to my course of studies.